scientific side, we're actually talking about concentration. But anytime we put concentration up there, we spend the next 10 minutes telling you why we said concentration rather than 5 minutes and telling you why it's not extraction. So I say 5 minutes. When we're doing that, it's also the mode of all the different solvents that are available. So on my side, I keep preaching that when people ask me what is the best extraction, the best extraction starts out as formulation centric. So we have a panelist that have experience across all the different solvents, and I've seen over the industry from 2013, where we're moving into it, where everyone had their lane. They stayed in their lane and they had big walls over their lane. You know, butane is the only way to do it. CO2 is the only way to do it. Ethanol is the only way to, and now I'm seeing as you get to 2019, they're crossing over lanes and saying, okay, there's a lot of product out there, there's a lot of pluses and minuses. So it's really, you start formulation centric and you start off with what you're trying to make for your patient or for your customer, and then you back up to what ingredients you need to make those and what broad band of ingredients you're needing to do that with. And then from there you move towards the economics, you move towards three things that I've always said. You get speed, you get scale, and you get selectivity. Pick two, right? You're not getting all three. It's going to be really hard to get all three. And then the fourth one you add to the tip of the pyramid that I like to add, and that is spin. And I make the spin into a dollar sign because I'm marketing and I can do that, and it's my own work. So you have speed, selectivity, scale, and then spin. What are you trying to do? And so we have a number of panelists here that allow us to have a disparate on their experiences. And so what I do is I'd ask from the far side, because usually you start here, and that always makes people. It's like an elementary school. If your name is Anderson, nothing good has come next. Meanwhile, Zempra, he never gets a chance to talk. So we'll start at the end.
My name is Joe, and I'm with C2 Extract. We are a large-scale ethanol plant out of Humboldt County. We've processed around 187 farms so far this season. Our primary focus in the industry is providing consistent product to brands that are needing to scale while maximizing the amount of money we're able to give back to farmers. So we currently do large-scale processing on 70-30 splits, where we bring in folks' cannabis process and then sell the oils to a variety of brands, and then take 70% of that money and give it back to the farming community where it came from. And that's mostly what we're up to.
Hi, my name is Chris Harkins. I'm with NUG. We are a vertically integrated cannabis company located in Oakland, California. We grow flower, we do concentrates, we also do edibles. Our manufacturing facility produces about 70% of the sauce that is on the open market today. We do a lot of contract manufacturing. Our hydrocarbon extraction lab does anywhere from 14 to 1,800 pounds of fresh frozen biomass in a given day.
Wow. My name is Guy Roncourt. I have a company called Papa & Barkley and also a sub-brand called Papa Select. We do direct lipid infusion for our core products on the wellness side, and we do mechanical separation for some of our products, and we also do live solventless water hash, ice water hash for the Papa Select product. So I also have a Denver-based company called Neos that does light extraction, light hydrocarbon extraction for vapor pens. So definitely familiar with the different modes of extraction, and kind of like John said, I used to be very in my lane and about the way I extracted, but it becomes about, what are you trying to do? What products are you trying to achieve, and picking the best modality of extraction for that product.
I'm Chad York. I'm not an extractor. I do processing equipment. So I work with a lot of extractors, a lot of processing companies, actually across the world. Last year we worked with a lot of the big guys in Canada, and a lot of them, we got small scale equipment that can do hundreds of pounds an hour to big ones that are doing 30,000 pounds an hour. So there's a lot of variables, but yeah.
So when you say processing, what kind of processing?
We sell industrial sized hammer mills, pellet mills, coolers, screeners, so basically large grinders. Pelletizing just densifies the product, helps with storage, helps with shipping. We help extractors get more volume through their systems, so you don't have to buy more extractors right away. And basically help with your footprint, and you said the magic word, scalability. That's something we've been dialing in.
So as we look, because I sent questions along the way, and then this is where we meet and stuff. So as you've looked at the process and moving them towards solvent, we'll start with the first one. That would be ethanol. And so, for when you're looking at ethanol, what are the type of parameters that you're mostly working through with an ethanol extraction?
And I just kind of want to know, for you guys out there, how many folks are looking for like specific operational usable intel in regards to extraction? How many folks are looking for like general overviews of what's going on in like the bigger picture? 2 people who are interested in one of those things.
So what happens? Yeah, so as you look, I'll go through the. Is this the first time you've seen them? Yeah. So it's been enjoyed. So I've seen a lot of the same faces, so I've gotten used to it. Yeah. So I can pretty know. I've made up my own names. I don't really know their names. I just sort of made them up. So there's Agnes, Fred, George,
right.
And so. But of the number of people that are here that have done extraction, how many people have done any extraction at all? So that's higher than most, and then most times you're here to learn about the generality of extraction, why choosing one over another. That sends most of the people.
Okay.
So they're hemp, they're looking at hemp, and
Got it.
so
we're all familiar.
Yeah. Okay.
Cryoethanol is really where large volume is at. There's not the pressures you see in butane and CO2, which eliminates a significant number of risks. Because it's cold, it's like less flammable than butane, so it's easier to get through permitting. There's some advantages there. Really in the operational world in cryo, it's about throughput capacity and temperature control. How big can you get your chillers? Are they paired to the size of your system? And is the throughput capacity you're generating from that paired with your supply chain to
It's so good to have the Air Force Base connected in. So it's mostly just the DEA that come over, so when the helicopters come lower, you it's the guy who actually been with us.
I thought one of these guys was blowing their nose.
It would be nice if they were blowing their nose. Thank you for doing that, but we're all males. So what kind of temperature do you typically, when you're looking at the different temperatures, what temperatures do you do for different products?
We're primarily producing high potency distillate, and so we're trying to live in the 45 to 80 degrees below zero. We are somewhat weather dependent on that for the chillers that we have outside, because we're fighting that same battle, fast throughput with expensive chillers, and how quickly can you get ethanol that cold. We have 40 to 80 below. We maintain better than 40 below all the way through our filtration steps, and then there we go to falling film evaporators, and temperatures are really different. But initial extraction is cold as possible. 40 is good, 60 is better, 80 is great.
So when you look at that, the allotropic plane of solvent makes minus 40 like CO2, subcritical CO2. They're very similar in their characteristics. So when he's doing minus 40 degrees, between minus 38 and minus 42 is allotropic with subcritical CO2. You go to minus 80, it gets better because now you have polarity and cold.
Yep.
So go ahead. So who else is doing ethanol or had experience with ethanol? Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so for us, it's back to really finding the right fit for the type of extraction you're doing. So we will generally run crude-based product that will go into distillate that will become an edible or a pen or something like that. So we're using generally lower quality material that will go into ethanol for us, but we're much like the seasoning folks, we run everything as cold as humanly possible, so we're not picking up any of, well, we're limiting the amount of lipids and fats that we pick up so that we can minimize the amount of winterizing and decoloring that we have to do, post-processing.
Go for it.
Yeah, I do not use ethanol. Luckily, my current company, Pop and Barkley and Pop Select, are completely solventless. Do you want me to talk about that right now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So we use alcohol to wipe our tables and sterilize stuff right now.
So that's an abstention. But yourself, when you start to have the material on the processing side, are you finding the ethanols are asking for a different style size of particle?
Yes, we have customers doing CO2 that jump lanes, and now they're doing ethanol as well, and they found that CO2 they can grind it to a finer consistency, but that same consistency through ethanol is giving them issues in their machines and in their systems. So we find that ethanol likes a bigger particle size, mostly like crumble instead of, like the fine flour material.
What I find with it, so if I'm looking at those, I'm typically liking between I'll say between 4 and 6 millimeters for CO2. I like to go a little bit higher with the ethanol. I tend to be more towards the 7 to 9 millimeter, because then I'm optimizing for what you have for different extractions. So when you hear about the formulation centric, it goes all the way back to how you process the material that goes into that. It goes back to the fact of how you have to fill each one. I was curious about the solventless. So what kind of solventless, and how do you define solventless?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, I guess all things that touch a plant, including the coconut oil or the water, are solventless. Solventless is, I think, a very specific cannabis term that has emerged to define quality in the pre-prohibition days when we had residual solvents and there wasn't as much testing. Solventless was a way to denote a clean product, right? So typically solventless is mechanical separation, keefing, and then pressing in that keef into rosin. So we make those products, and that's what powers edibles, and that's our B2B offering, usually running about 65% potent, but it's a dark amber, very weedy material because it does have certain plant fats in it, and it's not clarified. We do a direct lipid infusion where we actually take the flowers and we soak them in coconut oil. That we are looking to get all the plant fats and the chlorophyll, because we found that both internally via tincture or topical, those other materials are very synergistic. So having a good amount of chlorophyll, a good amount of phytonutrients, as well as the cannabinoids and all the terpenes make for a better product. So although I've been called on the coconut oil being the solvent in our direct lipid infusion, yes, okay. Then on the other side, on the concentrate side, for smokables, as these gentlemen have described, you don't want chlorophyll, you don't want plant fats, you want basically the purest oil. The way we look at it is, especially in Humboldt, we look at it as all fruit trees. You guys are familiar with what the cannabis plant looks like. We're just trying to get the trichome. Right, so when we create ice water hash, we partner with farms up north. We send our freezer truck there. We lightly shred the smalls, right, in a certain way. We freeze them right there at the farm, and then we basically gently wash them in ice water with the hope that just like a ripe fruit, that abscission will knock off those balls of hash. We sieve that, and we're looking for, literally at the lab, it looks like a basket of fruit. You can see every single one. Now, that's not stable because typically at room temperature, they want to melt into like a butter or a texture. So at that point, we determine strain to strain whether we should press it into a rosin or whether we should try to preserve it as 6-star hash. We do deliver that stuff in a freezer. And so the problem with solventless is while it is individual trichomes in pure fruit oil, it's harder to scale and of course much more costly because we do leave a lot of cannabinoids in it. We are trying to figure out ways to do something downstream, like does that post-wash product go through a direct lipid infusion? Should we be selling it to a co-partner that does cryoethanol or can blast it for live resin? Because we're only getting maybe 5% of the cannabinoids, and then there are more cannabinoids in there. So that's the next step in our evolution in solventless. It's like solventless will never take all the API out, but our philosophy is there does need to be that top tier, right? The fact is, you know, once you understand what trichome heads look like, it's kind of like the version of like Tang or fresh squeezed orange juice. Sure, it's harder to get fresh squeezed orange juice. It's not as scalable, but people seek it out, and when you get it, you're like, oh, that's awesome, it's fresh squeezed orange juice. That's how we treat live rosin, right? So that's my thing on solventless.
It's, so it just came to mind that you all are contract manufacturers. And so how is it that you went from a small scale and you thought this was a good idea? I mean, there has to be a story that you started off with a small or not a good idea. Yeah. So how'd you all start off? I mean, you couldn't have started off making big stuff and being a contract. I mean, everyone made small ethanols. I'll start even with your side. I mean, because we were, all right. So I'll go back in time. So in 2013, as I was moving into the industry with CO2 and such. And CO2 at the time was taking 18 to 24 hours. I figured out a way to do it in 90 minutes, and suddenly we were selling them like popcorn. But you would go to the places, and Walmart had a large inventory of Ninja grinders. Shockingly. And so you would go to the place, and it would typically, you would have a great big huge 5-pound tote bag, and you would take out the material, and you take out the trim, and then you put it in the Ninja grinder. And you'd shake it. You had to shake it. This was your process. You put it in the Ninja grinder, you shut the top, put it on,
slap the side of it.
Dump it in, put more stuff in, until the ninja grinder went, oh. And it gets all sticky and hot, and now you have bad things. And so the next step in that process, before we went to grinders like this, is we would have multiple ninja grinders. So that way, when you did 2 on this one, you let it cool down. You did 2 on this one, so you're constantly rotating. So you would go to Walmart every day and buy 10 ninja grinders, not just 1, 10 times a day. And so that's how it all started. You guys must have started back then.
Yep.
What's your story and how you got to this big stuff?
I can start. So in Colorado, we definitely used ninja grinders for my Neo's vapor pen company. We were doing light hydrocarbon back then. We were like literally having to pack columns, some case freeze columns, and yeah, it starts usually by hand and manual. With Pop and Barkley, we started with 5 people. We were hand filling our products, but scaling is part of the business. It's visioning. And really, I think what drove us is, advocacy, safe access for cannabis products. So the minute you create something that's helping folks or that people are resonating with, and I view all cannabis products as wellness products, even a vape pen or a concentrate. The fact is, if used appropriately, it's replacing your glass of wine or whatever. Vape pens early on were very good for newbies because it's an easier barrier of entry for them to get into cannabis. And now, even my mom will, instead of having 2 glasses of wine, will have a glass of wine with her vapor pen, but it reduces her alcohol consumption, which is definitely a good thing as we get older. But yeah, Neo's started with just 3 people and grew to about a team of 25 that still operate in Colorado. Pop and Barkley is a little bit larger company because California is a larger state. We started as 5 people in a house, doing lipid infusion and keefing our products and whatnot. And now we're 191 people, about 75 on the manufacturing side up north in Eureka. And yeah, it's just like our company mission is unlocking the power of the plant to improve people's lives. And so, we view this as a nascent industry that has been wrongfully held down. And so getting big is just, it's like, of course, we want to provide beyond the money and the growing the business, it's about getting this plant out there, getting these products out there, having alternative medicines and alternative recreational products.
I guess I'll go next. So much like you, I started out in my backyard building a single closed loop extractor, right? With somebody working for me. And a few years later, we partnered up with Nug, and I think I started out, we had 5 people. Right now, in our manufacturing, we're over 50 people. We would process, maybe a couple hundred pounds a month. Now we're doing 1,800 pounds a day. And I came from a technology background of scaling, large online internet systems. And so for me, scaling was always an interesting kind of problem for this industry. And so yeah, we started with a single tower machine, and now we basically have 6 extractors that are running 20 hours a day. And it happened almost overnight.
So I do. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Is it working?
Not working, but
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Wait, go ahead.
So,
No, go ahead. Try
Go
again.
ahead and try it.
yeah, you'll turn it on.
All right, there you go.
Just keep talking.
Hello, everybody. So I too started in my backyard. I was a kid who I grew up in Texas and carried High Times in my back pocket. And I took 3 because they confiscated from me at school, and I didn't get the other one out of my car. So I was like fervently on this warpath.
I feel very good that was the magazine of choice. Just saying.
Only one available.
And like the best parts of my career have been when I recognized that I was standing inside an article that I read.
What's it for?
I like ended up in a Jamaican garden.
Turn it
Like,
off?
"Hey, was this in High Times?" And I was like, wow, I'm here now. It's amazing. Yeah, I came out to Humboldt County and we saw our window. And I grew up in machine shops in the oil fields and doing sales in New York City and a couple other things. And so when it turned out you could run cannabis machines and sell cannabis oil, I was like, dear God, I've been training for this. And so we started doing the same thing. I had 12 men. I think we were one of the first continual operation shops. As of 6 years ago, we've been 24/7 since then until now. And so back then we processed 1,000 a week, and now it's 1,000 pounds of dry material a day. We're doing about 55,000 grams of production every day at peak. And so yeah, it's just a very smooth progression. I went straight into recirculating systems. I never did the open tubes or anything. You saw that. It looked like a great way to dilatate your skin. So we jumped straight into recirculating butane and vacuum ovens and hydrocarbon sensors and explosion-proof fans and passive airflow. And it was just a very natural progression. We moved into Humboldt County's very first licensed Type 7. I think we were one of the first few in the state to get our state approval. So we started off with a Type 7, and then our market just flipped. And when we set it up, they said, "Well, it's 100 pounds of a week of shatter." I said, "No problem, it's a cake." And then we built that, and they said, "Nobody wants that. Everybody wants distillate." so I was like, well, that's what we were moving towards, but you got it. So then we rebuilt our whole lab, and then we got it set up, and then we actually rebuilt the entirety of our lab every 90 days for the first year we were in business. And so we went from 3 people running 8-hour shifts 7 days a week to now we're saying ballpark 50 people. We do run 24/7. We have not had more than a 16-hour downtime window. Can you hear me now? And so really, yeah, the big thing for me is I know that there's been a bunch of days in my life where I was going to do one thing and then I went and smoked cannabis and I ended up doing another thing, and whether that's like tea party on the floor with kids, or that's like going to the park with friends and meeting different strangers, or going to like this event instead of that event. I really love knowing that that's what we're doing in Penn. I like to sit around and do the math. Like, how much oil I pumped out? How many people are probably hanging out? It's all evenly divided across time. It's like 10 to 30,000 people an hour, and that's like it's like it's a hurricane of butterfly wings making a difference. Somebody out there quit a job they should have quit. Somebody out there like met a lady attacked it that never existed, and like all these people on the stage do that for millions, and that's what I see on this one.
So each one of them might say, but what I've found is the successful people in this industry haven't cared about the monetary gains. It's been, how do I make a safe product? How am I influencing other people? And so I don't know these people before I got here. Well, kind of knew of their companies, but I didn't know them. But every single story that you're finding, so when you're looking for extractors, I would look for that common theme of the people you interview. As you're moving forward to this, I think you're finding the idea that there are refineries. These gentlemen have refineries. You can call them extraction, but they're really refineries. And so from that process, it goes back to the milk industry, it goes back to the oil industry, it goes back to the orange juice industry, where you bring your product to someone that you trust is going to bring you an oil back from what you had. So when you're looking at that process, you have to say, if you're starting your own business and you're starting an extraction refinery, do you have the people around that you can serve, and do you have the experts to do it? So that brings me, of course, to the next question. That's OSHA. So how do you guys do with, I know, I understand the regulations. What about OSHA?
Well, we just onboarded our first safety officer. One thing I will say is, while regulations in California are pretty onerous, the BCC and CDPH have been, while I was complaining in the beginning, I realized now they've actually incubated our industries, because they did not ask questions that they could have asked right from the front. If we were talking about breweries right now, lots of breweries have been built. You're building a brewery to spec, OSHA standards, GMP standards right from day one. Because they didn't know anything about cannabis, I don't know about these gentlemen, but I know that our lab has gone through evolutions, and I proactively want to get to GMP standards, want to get to ISO standards, but I didn't have to start there. I was allowed to start A, in my house. 2, be familiar with our location on 4th Street in Eureka. It was a little more than a barn. It was literally, it had burned down. I had to like repair some fire damage. Sure, I put some FRP and made it clean, but it was still a pretty basic facility, but that allowed us to gain traction with the brand, deliver our products to market, and we proactively iterated and not only make sure we have clean product to pass all the other compliance testing, but also our facilities have gotten better. And now that I have like automated machines with 55-gallon drums and all kinds of stuff moving around, safety has become quite an issue. And so we just hired a safety officer that just literally rolls around, making sure that people have steel-toe shoes, slip-resistant shoes, safety glasses on, heat-resistant Kevlar like things on there, that kind of stuff. It's terribly important.
So I'll even echo that. We hired a safety and compliance officer a little over a year ago. OSHA 30, he's provided respirator compliance training. Everybody's gotten CPR trained now. He does exactly what you were saying. He literally walks around all of our facilities doing reports, pointing out where somebody doesn't use their PPE.
What's a PPE?
Personal protective equipment. So every type of job or function has a certain set of equipment or protection items that you need to be using, whether it's goggles or gloves or what have you. And every other industry already has very clear guidelines. And I agree, we've been very fortunate. The regulators have been actually really good with us, and we've been working together. And in one of our first interactions with the state regulators, we get to the end and they're like, you guys are looking great. Do you have any feedback for us? And my feedback was, you just came in here and looked at all my equipment. It has to be ASME certified. I have to have UL listed equipment. I said, and then I pointed around to my team and I said, if I hire a plumber to work on the plumbing in my house, I have to have a plumber that is a certified, is a licensed contractor. Yet I can hire any of these guys off of the street and I have no way of knowing if they're going to be a danger to themselves or everyone else in this room. And so, you know, I basically was telling them, I'm not one to argue for more regulation or rules, but in this case, we absolutely need to come up with these type of things. So I think, you know, focusing on safety and compliance and really kind of building that culture within our industry is super important because we have a big target on us. That's why we have so many regulations as it is. So if we can lead, I think you said something about this yesterday, we have the opportunity to set example and start changing, you know, how other industries interact and operate. So.
I think it's been very nice, the grace period that we've gotten. I think when I got here, it was revolutionary that we told people they were going to run butane extractors when caught smoking weed, they'd be terminated on the spot. And also, if you smoked weed and a guy was next to you that worked at our company and he didn't tell us that you smoked weed before your shift and both of you were fired on the spot, that was like game changing. Like, we can't do drugs while we make drugs. So I think like the fact that that's where we started, just like 3-4 years ago, that was so much the case. So we also just brought on a compliance guy recently, and we're really lucky. Our shop lead, head foreman, is out of the Navy.
Well,
He's a
his mic is wireless, so it's not plugged to the board, but the other ones.
So if you don't have your safety glasses on, Casey will absolutely let you know it's a problem. But it's been a real evolution. Like in the beginning, just moving people to being clothed in stuff that could deal with solvent spills, and then moving people into everybody being in hairnets, just like basic health and safety. And then now it's, you know, X number of air changes per minute with hydrocarbon sensors built into the floor with explosion-proof fans and static discharge and, you know, making sure everything exits far enough to the ground so that the exhaust air with this level of butane can be diluted before it reaches head height for people.
I think the barrier to entry is increasing over the next 2 years. Because as you move towards the potency and making sure that you don't have pesticides in a product that's going out, there has been some leniency across the United States as far as having everything else available. I know with if you providing hammer mills for the breweries and everything else, and now you get to this one, what changes have you seen from your customers?
So with our customers, we started small scale. So a lot of people will just buy a hammer mill to start, right? A lot of you guys are like, what equipment do I need? We really push to do your research, talk to, if you're going to sell it to an extractor, right? Ask them how they want it. If you need a hammer mill, buy a hammer mill. If you don't, save your money. We do everything in stainless steel also, and we've noticed with some of our neighbors up north in Canada, they were buying carbon steel machines. Well, before they even had it on site installed and running, their regulations have changed. We know facilities that had to spend millions on top of the millions they already spent because as they're enacting and applying to all their rules, they're changing. And they just went recreational, and I was just talking to a gentleman who said, well, we can't even buy it in Ontario. We have to order it, and all the addresses are being tracked, and there's a lot of things going on there. So in a lot of facilities here in the States, people that are making resellable products, and like the room next door to where you're processing, we're seeing explosion-proof, dust-proof motors. Everyone's going more towards dust collection systems, which we highly recommend because you're saving your keep, you're saving your trichomes, basically your profit. And people are just jumping on stainless steel when they can. But as of right now, we're still selling a lot of carbon steel, and this is the grace period. They're still figuring things out, so you are still allowed to get away with it without spending 3 times the money
on your machines right now?
The other one we're having is CIP. When I first mentioned CIP, you know, people were just looking at me like I had 7 heads. So I did that back in 2014. So on the because I came out of water, so I had a clean in place on the water CO2. So I had a whole method and wrote a whole manual on how it went back through. And the rest of my competitors at the time were going, that is the stupidest thing. I says, if you open up a pressure regulator, I guarantee you take that pressure regulator and you stick a Q-tip up there, you're going to have oil. And I saw that in the state of Maine, where they were making a THC product, and then they moved over to CBD for seizures, and there was THC in it because you stick your little. So that sounded terrible. So a pressure regulator works because it feels the pressure and then moves back down. If you have this oily substance, it will stick up there. And so those are the things. So CIP is clean in place. You have total regulations, and you have propellers that go around that aren't used in the process, but they're used in the clean in place side. So I think that as you're seeing this industry, you're going to find more and more of the safety things. You're going to have the OSHA people joining. Steel-toed shoes. I buy Keen steel-toed shoes. I look great in them. And they raised me up another 2 inches. But I mean, as you go back through the process, having that, they don't have to be like you're some sort of workbook and you feel like you're Frankenstein walking around. These steel-toed shoes are pretty nice.
And important.
Oh yeah, and important. By the way, you lose your feet when you wear the thongs. Is it thongs? Flip-flops. Thongs is a different thing. Well, so do we have any questions? Yes, sir. Oh, you got to wait for the microphone. Sorry. I know you're.
Which one?
This is to the entire panel. I'm touching on your first comment about the 3 S's on selectivity as a chemist. I'd love to hear what the panel uses today, sees a need for in their process to understand how good or what point their oil is for the chemistry they want for the final product. So I don't know if it's in-house, external third party, but just the current state of the land now and what you maybe like to see as we move to these more regulated workflows.
So sort of like at-line and in-line processing, like PAT?
Sure.
All right.
The biggest thing for us recently is bringing on in-house analytics. We have HPLC and we're working to bring GC and a couple other things in-house. This has been enormous. The time delay between any step of a process occurring and being able to get a sample out to a state-certified lab and then get a sample back, whether we got to send drivers or shipping, all these things, it's a nightmare. And so the in-house analytics, I think, are one of the really key steps for anybody moving and ascending through the levels because it gives you the ability to in-process, see what's happening, and be able to tell changes are even occurring. Without the ability to look inside and see what's going on with potency, see what's going on with pH, and see what's going on with cannabinoid shifts, it really limits our ability to dial the process, the material that's in the system. And so I think it's been the biggest change we've made has been giving ourselves vision into what's actually happening at the chemical level. And I think having someone in-house, we have a brand new in-house analytical chemist, and just you've got to have that going. I think it's crucial.
Take that too. Yeah, so for us, we have an analytic and synthetic chemist on staff, and his primary job is targeting and selecting cannabinoids and trying to get them isolated. On top of that, we work very closely with a couple of local labs for doing R&D testing, state labs, but we also work with a couple of little private labs that are just doing R&D testing, and they give us services that the state labs can't actually offer. So in distilling in the last couple of years, we've done some crazy stuff, and we've actually changed the way the chiral chemistry is for some of the cannabinoids, and we've had tests come back that started out at 80% and then would come back from our lab at 4%. Well, in working with different labs, we were able to have samples sent out for NMR and found out that we had actually isomerized delta 10.
Yep.
And then we were then able to work with this lab though to develop kind of a pseudo standard. And now we can send those samples off to them and they can actually tell us when we are trying to make the delta 10 now. So it really comes down to having really good relationships with labs or having the in-house analytics and then the ability to really leverage, you know, those instruments.
So everyone know what delta 10 is? So what you do is you have delta 9. So what it does is it names where the double bond is. So you take the double bond, so if I'm making a ring here, so that's my ring, there's a double bond there, so that's delta 9. When that double bond moves over to the other side, it's delta 8. Delta 8 is far more stable than delta 9. Just the strain on those carbon bonds is very high on delta 9. That's why it switches so quickly and it goes over to delta 8. Delta 10, the double bond goes down here, and then you can also get 10A. I don't know if you got any exo. Did you get any exo? So exo is when the double bond's on the methylene group on the top. So if you do really bad stuff, you'll get delta 8. If you do really bad stuff, you'll get delta 10 and delta 10A. If you're really bad to it, it goes to exo. And the thing is that each one of those, if you give that to a customer, they have an experience that they aren't ready for, and for a long time. So, other than that, it's another great day in paradise.
From our end, we do want to bring in an in-house analytical person, not necessarily to do testing, but really just to keep the labs honest, right? Because there's a lot of variance in labs, and I just want somebody to be able to, I'm past just seeing a COA. I need to see the chromatograph, and I need to have some person evaluate that besides just the lab. So that part I think is true for all of us. But from a product manipulation standpoint, because we are not processing heavily the distillate, we're keeping it pretty basic. We have to work with the farmers. So most of our work in terms of evaluating product happens at the farm level, right? So whether it's cultivars that wash well for the solventless line, or cultivars that infuse well in the direct lipid infusion, not all of them work the same. And so keeping those consistent. Right now, in theory, we should have just partnered with a large house and gotten just all our input, but that would never work. It's also not part of our brand ethos, so we built out our procurement department and work with about 75 farms, not all in Humboldt, which is what we'd like, but there's just not enough right now. So throughout the Emerald Triangle, about 75 relationships where we go. We talk about the cultivars. This year, this full term, we have certain farmers where we prepaid for a certain portion of their farm to grow exactly cultivars that we did R&D on last year. And so a lot of our optimizing of extraction, if you will, or infusion, for us is happening at the farm level. We spent last year basically identifying things that had the trichome profile and the terpene profile that we felt were adequate for our products. And now we're having them grown out completely. And I think we're going to, as a company, continue to refine that process. So while manipulating at the lab level is definitely a thing and a skill, manipulating at the farm level is a whole other level of so it goes beyond pollen chucking. It's not just, in cannabis how there's always a new strain, there's always the new. Well, trying to stay ahead of that as an extractor so that you can bring that newest extract to market, but know that it works for your process is pretty important, right? So last year, I think it was all about the papaya. The year before that, it might have been 2 years was Girl Scout cookies, but being right at the farm level, working with them so that when the new strains come out, you are already ready to wash them or process them is how we've been approaching optimizing our processes.
And from a milling standpoint, we see it's basically what you're looking to extract. When people are getting distillate and isolate, they can run volumes through their hammer mill and they still get a quality product. But there are some people that want to isolate certain terpenes and other things in the plant, and then they have to handle it a different way.
Thank you. Another question? Oh, no, I don't I have till 1:15? What time is it?
Oh, you got a question?
Hey, I was hoping you could maybe go into the different effects of delta 8 versus 9, 10, and exo. You don't have to go into 9 so much if you don't.
Got that one online.
You got that one down? Delta 8 is 10 times less, I'll call it bioavailable for psychoactivity. It also goes to different sites. But it lands on the molecule a little bit differently because the double bond's in a different place. And because it's not so strained, it falls on those sites differently. Exo, I have no idea because no one's done any real work on exo except for anecdotal of, as I remember Thursday type of thing. I don't know another way to explain it. So you have amnesia for a longer period of time. So there's things you're trying to forget and you want to skip a couple days, that's probably, yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I'm bad. We
kind of look at Delta 8 as like an entry, like a good entry point. I call it like the soccer mom card because I think Delta 8 is going to be a good foray in for some people into cannabis because it does have a lighter experience. Delta 10, from my experience, is different. It has a delayed onset, but a little more psychoactive. I didn't necessarily experience what you're saying.
Why in the Expo?
Oh, okay, I got Expo. However, we've been working on conversions lately to CBN, and yeah, I've lost days after having 10 milligrams of CBN.
So CBN is so flat. So Delta CBD's kind of moves around a bit because it's more flexible because it doesn't even have a third ring, and then Delta 9 is more stringent, and then it still has a bit of a confirmation, but CBN is flat. You have 2 phenyl rings, it's flat as a pancake, and it goes to different sites. And so if you only need like 1 or 2 milligrams of the CBN actually that.
Even less than a nanomole.
Yeah, that's what we found. Even a natural process, just letting heat naturally force out Delta 9 to CBN. Yeah, it's pretty strong stuff. I've had some interesting experiences. Like, cause intuitively I was like, oh well, let's force this and make at least 40 milligrams per gram. Like it should be something like that. Yeah, 1, 2 milligrams per gram, and you have a real sedative effect. I think that's definitely one of the new cannabinoids that we're going to see on the marketplace because as a sleep additive, it's amazing, right? So when used correctly in the right milligrams, it will replace things like Ambien, right? And like other cannabis products, when treated appropriately at the right milligram dosage, and I'll just say in a full spectrum oil, you are going to get a much better sleep medication with lower toxicity and, more importantly, lower risk of addiction.
Thank you very much.